The cemetery was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that presses into your chest, tightens your throat, and makes the cold feel colder. Ryan Miller stood stiff beneath the gray Montana sky, his shoulders squared like he was still on the battlefield. Only this time there was no enemy to face, no orders to follow, no mission to complete, just a casket, just silence, just the raw, impossible truth that his wife was gone. Snow fell in thin, lazy flakes, melting the moment they touched the polished mahogany. Ryan didn't flinch. He hadn't cried. Not once. He couldn't afford to. His girls needed someone solid, someone who didn't break. He looked down at the small hands in his. Sophie on his right, Lily on his left. Both 6, both in matching navy coats with mittens too big for their fingers. Sophie leaned into him, eyes wide and unfocused, while Lily kept her gaze down, tracing circles in the frost-covered grass with the toe of her boot. Ranger, his German shepherd, sat still behind them, ears alert, tail unmoving. He hadn't barked once since Emma died, like he understood. Ryan tried to speak during the service, something about how Emma lit up every room, how she loved sunflowers, how she danced barefoot in the kitchen when no one was looking. But his throat locked, and the only sound that came out was air. So the pastor spoke instead, and Ryan just stood there holding the hands of 2 girls who didn't fully understand what death meant, only that it had taken their mother and left a hole in the shape of her smile. After the funeral, people approached, hugged, whispered condolences like they were prayers. Ryan nodded, thanked them, but didn't hear a word. His mind was a carousel of unfinished memories. Emma's laugh, the curve of her lips when she read bedtime stories, the way she'd stroke Lily's hair when she cried at night. Gone. All of it. One moment she was alive, the next a truck ran a red light and the world stopped spinning the way it used to. The girls hadn't seen the body. He hadn't let them. But Sophie had seen the crash. She'd been in the back seat. Since then, she refused to ride in the car unless Ryan sat in the back with her. Even then, she clutched his arm the whole way, her body stiff with fear. Lily had shut down in a different way, stopped talking entirely for 10 days, only whispered to Ranger when she thought no one was listening. Ryan watched them now as they walked hand in hand between rows of graves, their little boots crunching over snow. Ranger followed behind like a shadow. Emma's parents were there too, cold and rigid as the air. Her mother's eyes were red, but not from crying today. She'd cried all she could at the hospital. Her father didn't speak to Ryan, didn't look at him, just held his wife's elbow like she might crumble. Ryan didn't blame them, but he didn't forgive them either. They'd never liked him, never approved. A soldier is not a father, her father, Gerald once said. He's a man trained for war, not love. Maybe he was right, but Emma had chosen him, and now she was gone. Ryan tightened his grip on the girls' hands as they reached the truck. The old SUV looked smaller now, like grief had shrunk the space inside. He helped them in, buckled their seatbelts with care. Ranger jumped in the back and settled between them. He always did. Ryan sat behind the wheel and stared out at the gravestones, his jaw clenched until it hurt. "We'll figure it out," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Lily turned her head just slightly. "Will Mommy find us again?" she asked in a voice so quiet it barely crossed the space between them. Ryan's chest tightened. He reached back, touched her cheek gently. "No, sweetheart," he said, voice gravelly. "We'll carry her with us instead." Neither girl replied, but Lily leaned against Ranger, burying her face in his fur, while Sophie pulled out a small notebook from her coat pocket. Ryan had seen her writing in it late at night. "Letters to Mommy," she told him once, "in case she's watching." He started the engine. The heater kicked in with a slow hum, but the warmth didn't come fast enough. He looked at their faces in the mirror, tired, pale, too old for 6. They didn't deserve this. None of them did. As he pulled away from the cemetery, Ryan didn't look back. He couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Ranger let out a soft whine, low and mournful. Ryan reached down and brushed his hand over the old dog's head. "I got them," he whispered. "You just keep watch." Snow swirled in the headlights as they disappeared down the road. 3 shadows held together by a ghost they all still loved. The road to Bozeman was long and slick with snow, lined with bare trees that looked like broken fingers clawing at the sky. Ryan kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the gear shift, his thumb brushing the worn rubber like it might calm the storm inside his chest. The heater whirred, not quite keeping up with the chill, and from the back seat came the occasional murmur of the girls' voices, soft, hesitant, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to speak. Ranger rested between them, alert but still, his eyes tracking the shifting sky through the fogged windows. Ryan hadn't told them where they were going. He wasn't sure they'd understand. Hell, he wasn't sure he understood. But when you're a father with no job, no home, and two grieving daughters, you knock on the last door still standing, even if it was once slammed in your face. When they pulled up to the familiar white house on the hill, Sophie recognized it first. Her breath caught in her throat, and she clutched Lily's hand. Ryan saw it in the rearview mirror but didn't say a word. He parked, killed the engine, and let the silence stretch. Then slowly he opened the door. The air hit him like a punch. It smelled like wood smoke and memory. The girls followed, Ranger close behind. Ryan rang the doorbell, and it echoed too long in his ears. Patricia Lawson, Emma's mother, opened it with a look that froze halfway between grief and suspicion. She was thinner now, older, her blonde hair threaded with more silver than Ryan remembered. Her eyes dropped immediately to the girls. "Sophie, Lily," she breathed, voice trembling. "Hi, Grandma," Lily said softly. It was the first time she'd spoken to someone other than Ranger in days. Patricia knelt and hugged them both, long and tight, like she was afraid letting go would make them disappear again. Ryan stood silently waiting. Gerald Lawson appeared in the doorway behind her, his face granite hard, his mouth already drawn in that familiar scowl. "What do you want, Ryan?" he asked, no warmth in his voice. Ryan kept his tone steady. "I need help." That was it. No excuses, no explanations. Just truth, raw and ugly. Gerald looked him up and down, eyes lingering on the worn boots, the unshaven jaw, the faded army jacket stretched thin across Ryan's frame. "And you brought them here? Why?" "Because they're your granddaughters," Ryan said evenly. "Because they need warmth, food, stability. And I thought maybe you'd want to know them." Patricia stood, her eyes still wet. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Ryan hesitated for a second, then ushered the girls inside. Ranger followed only to be stopped by Gerald's outstretched arm. "Not the dog." "He stays with them," Ryan said firmly. "Always." Gerald glared but stepped aside. The inside of the house was warm, polished, full of old photos and the soft hum of classical music playing in the background. Ryan sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa while the girls curled up on the rug with Ranger. Patricia brought hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, and the room smelled briefly like old holidays. For a moment, Ryan let himself believe this might work. Then Gerald cleared his throat. "You can't take care of them, Ryan." Ryan looked up slowly. "Excuse me? You're unstable, homeless, a soldier with trauma. That's not a father. That's a liability." Patricia didn't object. She just looked away. Ryan's jaw tightened. "They're my daughters." "And our granddaughters," Gerald said. "We can give them a life. You can't. You want me to leave them here? It's what's best for them." The girls hadn't heard, or so he thought, but as Ryan stood, preparing to say something, anything, he saw Sophie's face. She had turned her head slightly, eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight. Later that night in the bathroom upstairs, she would whisper to Lily, "Grandpa says Daddy's dangerous." That would be the moment her innocence cracked just a little. Ryan stayed one more night in the guest room. He didn't sleep. Patricia brought a blanket, said nothing, and left. The girls slept curled around Ranger. Ryan watched them breathe, counting seconds between each rise and fall of their tiny chests. In the morning, Gerald was waiting in the kitchen with a document and a pen. "Emergency guardianship filing," he said. "You can sign now. Make it easy." Ryan didn't take the pen. He looked at the line that said, "Father relinquishes his rights," and his hands trembled. Not from fear, but fury. Patricia stood nearby, silent. The girls were still upstairs. Ranger sat at Ryan's feet, growling low. Ryan folded the paper once, neatly, then again. Then he tore it in half, then into quarters, then dropped it into the sink. "I'll find another way," he said quietly. "You'll regret this," Gerald muttered. Ryan met his eyes, calm but unyielding. "Not as much as they would." He turned and walked toward the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The first night back in the truck felt like defeat. Not the loud kind you scream into the sky, but the quiet kind that sits in your chest like a weight you can't lift. Ryan parked beneath a faded street lamp in the corner of a grocery store lot, the snow already dusting the windshield like powdered sugar. He adjusted the seats as flat as they'd go, laid the sleeping bags across the back, and made a nest between discarded fast food wrappers and boxes of cereal. The girls didn't complain. They were too tired, too used to going where he said, too polite to say it wasn't home. Ranger curled up at their feet, forming a wall of warmth and fur. He never let them sleep without resting one paw across Sophie's leg like a living seatbelt. Ryan leaned back in the driver's seat, arms crossed, staring up through the frost-covered sunroof, his breath visible in the dim light. Outside, the town was quiet, but inside the car, everything was still moving. Thoughts, fears, failures. He hadn't imagined this. Being 36, a widower sleeping in a truck with two 6-year-olds and a dog. But life hadn't asked for his permission. Every morning, Ryan woke before dawn, wiped down the windows with an old t-shirt, and helped the girls get dressed in layers, brushing their hair with fingers still stiff from the cold. Breakfast was usually granola bars and juice boxes. Lunch sometimes didn't happen at all. He picked up shifts where he could, loading boxes at a warehouse, hauling trash at construction sites, sometimes even doing temp security when a buddy from the army gave him a call. He never stayed in one place long. Too hard to answer questions. Too hard to explain where he lived. After school, Ryan would take them to the library. It was warm, it was quiet, and nobody asked questions. The girls sat at the same table every evening, coloring or reading, while Ryan borrowed books on parenting trauma. Anything that might make him feel less like he was drowning. At 6:45, when the librarian began dimming the lights, they packed up quietly and walked back to the SUV parked on the edge of the lot. Some nights they stopped at the dollar store. Some nights they didn't. Most nights, Sophie wrote. She had found an old spiral notebook in one of the donation bins, its cover bent and pages partly torn. She called it her letters to Mommy. Each night, under the soft glow of the dome light, she'd write a few lines in pink ink, fold a page, and slide it under the seat cushion where she thought no one would find it. Ryan knew. He saw her do it. But he never interrupted, never read them. He figured some things needed to be hers alone. Lily, on the other hand, had started humming again. Just little songs with no words. The kind Emma used to sing while doing dishes. It broke Ryan's heart and healed it at the same time. On the 6th night, the cold bit harder than usual. The engine wouldn't start, so Ryan wrapped the girls in all the blankets they had and pulled Ranger closer to share warmth. He sat up front again, his body aching from the seat, his mind racing. At 2:12 a.m., someone knocked on the window. Hard. Ryan jolted awake, heart thudding. Ranger growled. A flashlight beam cut through the back window, catching the glint of Lily's eyes. Ryan unrolled the window an inch. Yes, sir. A police officer peered in. Mid-40s, tired eyes, mouth tight. Got a call, he said. Someone reported kids sleeping in a car out here. Ryan stayed calm. They're my daughters. We're okay. The officer stepped back. Step out of the car. Ryan did. Ranger barked. Low warning. The girls stirred in the back. The officer looked inside, saw the blankets, the stuffed animals, the empty juice boxes. You homeless? Not permanently, Ryan said, hands in view. Just in between right now. The officer sighed, rubbing his hands together. Got a warm shelter downtown. Families only. Want me to call it in? Ryan shook his head. We're okay here. Safer than a room full of strangers. The officer looked at him for a long time. You got ID? Ryan nodded, handed over his VA card. Army? Yes, sir. You got a plan, soldier? Ryan hesitated. Yes, he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. The officer didn't press. He handed back the card. Try not to stay in one place too long. People worry, make calls. Ryan nodded. Understood. The man gave him a last long look, then walked back to his cruiser. Ryan stood there for a while after the taillights faded, breathing out slow clouds of air. When he climbed back in, Sophie was awake. Who was that? She asked. A cop, Ryan said. He just wanted to make sure we were safe. She looked at him, eyes full of questions, but she didn't ask them. Instead, she pulled her notebook closer, wrote a few more lines by the glow of the glove box light, folded the page, and tucked it away. Ryan closed his eyes and leaned his head against the window. It was going to be another long night. The letter came folded in thirds, left in a manila envelope on the windshield under a wiper blade, stiff with frost. Ryan tore it open with numb fingers, eyes scanning the bolded text at the top. Montana Department of Child and Family Services, followed by a court date stamped in unforgiving black. He didn't finish reading it right away. He sat there for a longer time, the engine off, breath clouding the air, while Ranger let out a low, uneasy growl in the back seat. Ryan looked over at the girls. Sophie was coloring a picture of three stick figures holding hands under a sun with too many rays. Lily was asleep, cheek pressed against Ranger's flank. Ryan folded the letter and slid it into the glove compartment without a word. That night, he parked behind the old church where the lights didn't reach. He didn't tell the girls about court. Not yet. He needed time to think, needed a plan. But plans required money, and money required hours, and hours were already swallowed up by trying to keep everyone fed and warm. Over the next few days, he tried to gather information. Legal aid was overbooked. The courthouse clerks gave him forms he couldn't understand. Every lawyer he called wanted a retainer he couldn't afford. He began to feel it again, that tightening in his chest, the invisible hands reaching in to crush his lungs. At night, when the girls slept, Ryan sat in the front seat, staring at the dashboard, Ranger's head resting on his thigh like an anchor. It wasn't just a court hearing. It was war, and he didn't have armor. Then came the day he saw the flyer, pinned to the community board at the library, slightly wrinkled from the heat of the radiator beneath it. Veterans Legal Assistance, free consultation, every Thursday. Ryan stared at it for a long time, memorizing the address, the phone number, the small print at the bottom that read, "Don't fight alone." Thursday was 2 days away. He could make it 2 more days. When Thursday came, Ryan dropped the girls at school with extra hugs and the promise of a surprise later. He drove across town to a small office wedged between a pawn shop and a discount furniture store, the kind of place most people would walk past without noticing. The waiting room had 3 chairs, all occupied. A coffee maker burbled in the corner, the smell mixing with old paper and someone's fast food lunch. Ryan stood by the door, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, until the receptionist motioned him forward. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Ryan Miller." She checked a list. "First time?" "Yes, ma'am." "Fill these out. Have a seat if one opens up." Ryan took the clipboard and leaned against the wall, pen hovering over the first line. Name, address, phone number. He paused at address. What was he supposed to write? Blue Ford Explorer, license plate 4DGH78, currently parked behind First Lutheran. He left it blank and moved on. 20 minutes later, a door opened and a woman stepped out, extending her hand. "Mr. Miller, I'm Sarah Jenkins." She wasn't what he expected. Young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that looked like they'd seen more than they should have. No uniform, no medals, just a simple blazer over jeans and practical shoes. She led him to a small office with a desk drowning in files and a window that faced a brick wall. A framed photo sat beside her computer, a young man in uniform, smiling. "My brother," she said, catching his glance. "2 tours in Afghanistan. We lost him when he came home." The words hung in the air. Ryan nodded once, understanding. "So," she continued, opening a fresh legal pad, "tell me what's happening." Ryan told her everything. The accident, the funeral, the SUV, the court summons. As he spoke, she took notes, occasionally stopping him to clarify a detail. She didn't offer sympathy or judgment, just listened with the focus of someone mapping terrain. When he finished, she set down her pen. "They're using your PTSD against you," she said, "and your housing situation. The grandparents have money, stability, and no combat history. On paper, it looks bad for you." Ryan's jaw tightened. "And in reality?" "In reality, you're those girls' father. You've never abandoned them, never hurt them, never failed to put them first." She leaned forward. "Tell me about Emma. What would she want?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't let himself think about that. "She'd want them with me," he said finally. She knew what her parents were like, Perfect on the outside, cold on the inside. She wouldn't want that for Sophie and Lily. Sarah nodded. Then we fight. I can't promise a win, but I can promise they won't take your daughters without one hell of a battle. For the first time in weeks, Ryan felt something other than fear and exhaustion. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close. It was purpose. What do we do first? First, we get you stable housing, not permanent, just something better than your truck. There's a veterans transitional program that might have space. Then we document everything, your parenting, the girl's attachment to you, their progress in school despite the circumstances. We create a narrative the judge can't ignore. Ryan nodded, already calculating how to make it work with his scattered jobs, the girl's school schedule, Ranger's needs. What about the grandparents? They've probably hired someone expensive. Sarah's smile was small but sharp. Probably. But you know what they say about David and Goliath. Sometimes the little guy wins. That evening, Ryan picked up the girls with a paper bag from the dollar store. Inside were two small stuffed animals, a purple cat for Lily, a blue bear for Sophie. What are these for? Sophie asked, turning the bear over in her hands. For being brave, Ryan said, and because we're going to stay somewhere new tonight. The veterans' shelter was cleaner than he expected, with small private rooms instead of open barracks. The beds were narrow but real, with sheets that smelled like industrial detergent and blankets that didn't have holes. There was a shared bathroom down the hall and a common area where other families ate microwave dinners at plastic tables. The girls explored the space with cautious curiosity, testing the bounce of the mattresses, peering out the single window at the parking lot below. Is this our new home? Lily asked. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed. Just for a little while, until we find something better. Sophie looked at him, her eyes older than her years. Is this because of Grandpa and Grandma? Ryan hesitated. He'd promised himself never to lie to them, but how much should he say? How much could they understand? Partly, he admitted. There's going to be a meeting where some people decide where you and Lily should live, and I want to show them that I can take care of you properly. But you do take care of us, Lily said, clutching her new cat to her chest. I know, sweetie, but sometimes grown-ups need proof. Sophie frowned. Can we tell them? Can we tell them you're a good daddy? Ryan's throat tightened. Maybe. We'll see. That night, after the girls fell asleep, Ryan sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift through the orange glow of the parking lot lights. Ranger lay at his feet, occasionally raising his head to check that the girls were still safely asleep. For the first time, Ryan allowed himself to consider the possibility of losing. What would happen to Sophie and Lily if they went to live with Gerald and Patricia? They'd have warm beds, certainly. Regular meals. Stability. But would they have love? The kind that accepts mess and mistakes, that sees beauty in brokenness. He thought of Gerald's rigid posture, Patricia's careful distance, the way they spoke about Emma as if she were a possession they'd lost rather than a person they'd known. Would his daughters grow up like that? Contained, controlled, perfect on the outside? Ryan closed his eyes and let his head rest against the cool glass of the window. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The following weeks blurred into a chaotic routine. Ryan met with Sarah regularly, building their case. She helped him file for temporary housing assistance, connected him with a veterans employment program that offered more stable work, and guided him through the maze of court paperwork. She also helped him understand what they were up against. Gerald had indeed hired one of the most expensive family lawyers in the state, a man named Victor Hargrove, who specialized in winning custody for wealthy grandparents. He'll try to paint you as unstable, Sarah warned during one of their meetings. He'll bring up every time you have struggled, every symptom of PTSD, every job you couldn't keep. He'll make it sound like you're one bad day away from falling apart. Ryan nodded. And what will you do? Show who you really are, a father who's faced impossible circumstances and still kept his daughters safe, fed, and loved. A man who served his country and came home wounded but not broken. The court date approached with the slow inevitability of an advancing storm. Ryan prepared the girls as best he could, explaining that they might need to talk to the judge, that they should just tell the truth about their life with him. What if we say the wrong thing? Sophie asked one night, her voice small in the darkness of their shelter room. Ryan stroked her hair. There is no wrong thing, as long as it's true. 2 days before the hearing, Gerald made his move. Ryan was leaving work when he saw the familiar Mercedes parked across the street. Gerald stepped out, immaculate in an expensive coat, his silver hair perfectly combed. "We need to talk," he said. Ryan stopped, keeping a careful distance. "I'm listening." "I've been investigating you," Gerald said, his voice cold. "I know about the nightmares, the panic attacks, the medication you sometimes can't afford. I know you punched a wall at your last apartment when the neighbors set off fireworks on the 4th of July. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Is there a point to this?" "The point is that I can make all of this public. I can make sure the judge knows every detail of your struggles. Or," Gerald paused, reaching into his coat pocket, "or you can sign these papers now, privately, and spare everyone the pain of a public battle you're going to lose anyway." He held out a folder, the same guardianship papers from before. "You'd do that?" Ryan asked quietly. "You'd drag everything into the open, hurt the girls just to win?" "To protect them," Gerald corrected, "from a man who can't even provide a home." Ryan looked at the papers, then back at Gerald's face, confident, privileged, certain of victory. "You know," Ryan said slowly, "for a long time I thought you were right, that I wasn't good enough for Emma, for the girls, that someone like you with money and stability would make a better father." He took a step closer. "But now I see it. You don't want what's best for Sophie and Lily. You want to win. You want to own them, like you tried to own Emma. And that's why I'll never sign those papers." Gerald's face hardened. "Then I'll see you in court." "Yes," Ryan said, "you will." That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He paced the small room, checking on the girls, adjusting their blankets, watching their peaceful faces in the dim light filtering through the thin curtains. Tomorrow, everything could change. Tomorrow, he could lose them. Ranger watched him from his spot on the floor, eyes reflecting the faint light. "What would you do, old boy?" Ryan whispered. "If someone tried to take your pack?" Ranger's ears perked up at the sound of his voice, but he didn't move from his protective position. "Yeah," Ryan nodded. "That's what I thought." He sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone, scrolling to the photos of Emma. Her smile, bright and unguarded. Her eyes, the same deep brown as Sophie's. Her hands, always in motion, always creating or comforting. "I need you tomorrow," he whispered to the image. "I need to know what to say." The phone screen dimmed, then went dark, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts and the sound of his daughter's breathing. Court day dawned clear and cold. Ryan dressed in his only suit, navy blue, slightly too large, borrowed from the shelter's donation closet. He helped the girls into the dresses Patricia had sent over, brushed their hair until it shone, and made sure they ate breakfast despite the knot in his own stomach. "Remember," he told them as they climbed into the SUV, "just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you." The courthouse loomed, all stone and columns and intimidating steps. Inside, the polished floors echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Ryan held the girls' hands tightly as they followed Sarah to the assigned courtroom. Gerald and Patricia were already there, seated behind a large table with Victor Hargrove, whose suit probably cost more than Ryan had made in the past year. Patricia gave a small wave to the girls. Gerald didn't look their way. Sarah led Ryan and the girls to the opposite table, her posture straight, her expression calm despite the stakes. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Ryan nodded, though the truth was more complicated. "Ready? No. Determined? Absolutely." The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned the room as everyone rose. "Be seated," she said, her voice neither warm nor cold, simply authoritative. The hearing began with Hargrove presenting the case for the grandparents. His voice was smooth as he described Ryan's unstable living conditions, his troubling history of PTSD, his inability to provide a proper home environment. He painted Gerald and Patricia as pillars of the community, with a beautiful home, financial security, and the moral foundation necessary to raise young girls in today's challenging world. Ryan felt his face grow hot as Hargrove spoke, but Sarah had warned him. "Stay calm, don't react. Let them show their hand first." When it was Sarah's turn, she rose slowly, deliberately, her approach entirely different from Hargrove's polished performance. "Your Honor," she began, "this case isn't about who has the bigger house or the better job. It's about who has been there every day through the darkest time in these children's lives. She presented evidence methodically. The girls' steady school attendance despite homelessness, letters from teachers describing Ryan's involvement, documentation of every effort he'd made to improve their situation. Yes, Ryan Miller has struggled, she acknowledged. He lost his wife suddenly and traumatically. He faced financial hardship. He lives with PTSD from serving his country. But through all of this, he has never, not once, put his needs before his daughters. She pointed to Gerald and Patricia. The plaintiffs claim they can provide a better home, but they've had months to help this family and chose instead to try to divide it. They didn't offer housing or financial assistance. They offered an ultimatum. Give up your children, or we'll make sure a judge takes them. Gerald shifted in his seat, his expression darkening. The judge called Ryan to testify. He walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and sat, his hands clasped tightly to stop them from shaking. Hargrove's cross-examination was brutal. He pressed on every wound, exposed every vulnerability. The nightmares, the medication, the time Ryan had to leave a job interview because the air conditioning made a sound like distant gunfire. And you believe you're fit to raise two young girls alone? Hargrove asked finally, his tone suggesting the answer was obvious. Ryan looked at Sophie and Lily, then at Gerald and Patricia, then back at the lawyer. I'm not perfect, he said. I know that. I know there are things I can't give my daughters right now, a big house, fancy clothes, expensive toys, but I can give them something else. I can show them that when life gets hard, and it will get hard, even in a big house with fancy clothes, you don't give up. You keep going. You find a way. He leaned forward slightly. My wife knew that. It's why she married me, even when her parents disapproved. She knew the difference between comfort and love, and she would want her daughters to know it too. Hargrove started to ask another question, but the judge held up her hand. I'd like to hear from the children now, in my chambers. Ryan's heart sank. The girls questioned alone. Would they be afraid? Would they understand what was happening? But there was no choice. The judge led Sophie and Lily away, leaving the adults in tense silence. Minutes stretched into an hour. Ryan sat rigid, staring at the wall, while Gerald whispered with Hargrove. Finally, the door opened. The girls came out first, their faces unreadable. The judge followed, resuming her seat. I've spoken with Sophie and Lily, she said. They're remarkably articulate for their age, and remarkably clear about where they want to be. She looked directly at Ryan. Mr. Miller, these proceedings are about determining the best interests of these children, not the best interests of their grandparents, or even, frankly, yours. The question is, where will they thrive? She paused, adjusting her glasses. The petitioners have significant resources. They could provide material comfort beyond what you can currently offer. But they have demonstrated, in my view, a concerning willingness to use these children as pawns in a power struggle. She turned to Gerald and Patricia. Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, your desire to be part of your granddaughters' lives is understandable, but attempting to separate them from their father, who, by all accounts and evidence, has been devoted to their welfare despite extraordinary challenges, is not in their best interest. Gerald started to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. Therefore, I am denying the petition for guardianship. Mr. Miller will retain full custody of his daughters. Ryan couldn't breathe. The words didn't seem real. However, the judge continued, I am ordering continued monitoring by family services for 6 months to ensure stable housing and appropriate care. And I strongly encourage all parties to work toward a visitation arrangement that allows these children to maintain a relationship with their grandparents, provided it does not interfere with their primary home life. She struck her gavel once. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom began to empty. Gerald and Patricia left quickly, without looking back. Sarah squeezed Ryan's arm, a small smile of victory on her face. Dad, Sophie called, running to him. Lily followed, arms outstretched. Ryan knelt and gathered them both, holding them so tightly he could feel their heartbeats against his chest. We get to stay with you, Lily whispered. Always, Ryan said, his voice breaking. Always. As they walked out of the courthouse into the bright winter sun, Ryan felt lighter than he had in months. The road ahead was still long and difficult. They still needed a permanent home, a steady income, a normal life. but they would face it together. All three of them. All four, counting Ranger, who waited patiently in the SUV, tail wagging as they approached. Ryan didn't see the man in the long dark coat, standing near a black sedan, 2 spaces over, watching them with curious eyes. He didn't notice the thick envelope in the man's hand, sealed with an embossed crest. Not yet. For now, there was only this moment. His daughter's hands in his, the winter sun on their faces, and the promise of tomorrow. The house creaked and settled around them as the night deepened. Outside, wind rustled through pine needles, a gentle, shushing sound that seemed to ease the girls into sleep faster than the city noises they were used to. Ryan lay awake, listening to his daughter's breathing, to the unfamiliar sounds of the house, to the occasional soft patting of Ranger's paws as he made rounds downstairs. His mind raced with questions, with plans, with the nagging feeling that there was more to this inheritance than a house and a brief letter. Walter Miller had been watching him, had known about his marriage, his military service, his daughters, had known when Emma died, yet he'd never made contact, never offered help during the months of homelessness and struggle. Why leave the house now? Why not years ago when Ryan's father was still alive? Eventually, exhaustion won out over curiosity, and Ryan drifted into a dreamless sleep. Morning brought sunlight streaming through uncovered windows and the excited chatter of the girls exploring their new surroundings in daylight. Ryan found them in the backyard, where an ancient tire swing hung from a massive oak tree and an overgrown garden plot hinted at summers long past. "Dad, there's a stream over there," Sophie called, pointing toward a line of trees at the property's edge. "Can we go see?" "Later," Ryan promised. "First, we need to clean up inside a bit." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Ryan found cleaning supplies in a hall closet and put everyone to work. They scrubbed floors, washed windows, beat dust from rugs and curtains. They brought in their few possessions from the SUV, making the space their own in small ways. Sophie's notebook on the kitchen table, Lily's collection of rocks on the windowsill, Ryan's army photo propped against a lamp. Ryan took stock of what needed fixing: a loose railing on the back steps, a dripping faucet in the upstairs bathroom, a window that wouldn't quite close in the spare bedroom. Small things, manageable things. The house itself was structurally sound, built to last through harsh Montana winters in the passage of time. When Ryan ventured into town for supplies, the locals regarded him with quiet curiosity. Oak Ridge was the kind of place where strangers were noticed, and news traveled fast. At the hardware store, the owner, a heavy-set man with calloused hands and a silver beard, paused while ringing up Ryan's purchases. "You're staying at the Miller place," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's right," Ryan replied, cautious. The man nodded. "Walter was a good customer. Kept that place up even when he wasn't living there. Sent me out twice a year to check the roof, the pipes." He handed Ryan his change. "Name's Earl, by the way, Earl Simmons." "Ryan Miller," Ryan said, accepting the man's firm handshake. "Miller," Earl repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Walter's grandson?" Ryan hesitated. "Yes." "Huh." Earl studied him for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Well, welcome to Oak Ridge. You need anything, you just ask. Folks here are decent, if a bit nosy." As Ryan turned to leave, Earl added, "Those woods behind the house, they run right up to the National Forest. Good hunting if you're into that. Walter used to take his dogs out there. Training, he called it." Ryan thanked him and left, feeling the weight of the man's gaze on his back. Walter had been known here, had been part of this community in a way his own grandson never was. The realization stung in a way Ryan hadn't expected. Back at the house, he found Sophie and Lily had taken the cleaning mission seriously. They'd organized the kitchen cupboards, lined up dusty canned goods by type and size, and made neat stacks of the plates and glasses they'd washed. "We found these," Lily said, holding up a set of faded cloth napkins embroidered with a simple M in the corner. "Can we use them?" "Of course," Ryan said, running a finger over the stitching. Had Walter's wife made these? Or had they been bought? Just another possession that had outlasted its owner. Sophie was more interested in the photographs she'd discovered, framed pictures that had been stacked in a drawer rather than displayed. "Who are these people, Dad?" Ryan looked at the image she held, a stern-faced man in an army uniform standing beside a German shepherd. The dog sat at attention, alert and disciplined, a perfect soldier in its own right. "I think that's your great-grandfather Walter," Ryan said, "the man who left us this house." "And the Dow?" Lily asked, peering over her sister's shoulder. "Not Ranger," Ryan said, "but maybe an ancestor of his." The girls accepted this with the easy belief of children, but the connection had sent a chill down Ryan's spine. How many layers were there to this inheritance? How many threads connected his life to Walter's? On the third day, while the girls were exploring the stream under Ranger's watchful eye, Ryan found the photos. They were in a cabinet in the dining room, hidden behind stacks of old china plates that hadn't been used in years. A leather album, its cover cracked with age, filled with black and white photographs held in place by yellowing corner mounts. Ryan sat at the dining room table and carefully opened the album. The first pages showed a young man in a World War II uniform, tall and serious, with the same jawline Ryan saw in the mirror every morning. Walter Miller as a young soldier, standing in front of tanks beside other men in uniform, alone against backdrops of European towns Ryan didn't recognize. Then came photos of a wedding, Walter and a petite woman with dark hair and a cautious smile. Photos of a small house, different from the one they were in now. Photos of a baby, then a toddler, then a serious-faced boy of about 10. Ryan's father, James Miller, the man who had raised Ryan with quiet determination and few words about his own childhood. Ryan turned the pages slowly, watching his father grow from a solemn child into a lanky teenager, and finally into a young man with defiance in his eyes and tension in his posture. The photos became less frequent then, as if the photographer, Walter presumably, had become less interested in documenting these years. The last photo of James was his high school graduation. After that, the subjects changed. Landscapes, dim. German shepherds, one after another, each in training poses or alongside Walter in various outdoor settings. Ryan was about to close the album when something caught his eye. A photo near the end, out of sequence with the others. A little girl, about 6 years old, with blonde hair and 2 braids, sitting on the very porch steps he had climbed 3 days ago. She was missing a front tooth, her smile lopsided and bright. Ryan's heart stuttered. He knew that smile. He'd fallen in love with that smile. He'd seen it every day for years and then in the faces of his daughters after she was gone. Emma. But how? How could Emma have been here, at this house, decades before Ryan ever knew it existed? He turned the photo over. In faded blue ink, someone had written, "Patricia and Emma, summer visit, 1991. Patricia, Emma's mother, and Emma, just a child, at Walter Miller's house. Ryan sat back, mind racing. Emma had never mentioned knowing his grandfather, had never spoken of visiting this house. Had her parents known Walter? Had she known who he was when she met Ryan? The sound of the girls' laughter floated through the open window, pulling Ryan back to the present. He closed the album carefully and returned it to the cabinet. There were too many questions and no one left to answer them. Walter was gone. His father was gone. Emma was gone. All he had were fragments, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed until now. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Ryan returned to the dining room with a flashlight. He retrieved the album and spread the photos across the table, arranging them chronologically, looking for patterns, for clues to the connections between his family and Emma's. Ranger sat beside him, watching the process with unusual intensity. When Ryan came to the photos of the German shepherds, the dog's ears perked up, his nose twitching toward the images. "You recognize them, don't you?" Ryan murmured. "They're like you." He examined the photos more closely. Each dog wore a military-style harness. Each stood with the alert posture of a working animal. In one photo, Walter stood beside a shepherd that could have been Ranger's twin, both of them in what looked like a training yard with obstacles and equipment. And then Ryan saw it, a small detail he'd missed before. In the background of one photo, partially obscured by shadow, was a sign, USMC Canine Training Facility, Quantico, VA. Walter had been a military dog trainer. And Ranger. Ryan looked at the dog beside him, really looked at him for the first time in years. The gray around his muzzle, the old scar across his left shoulder, the way he always positioned himself between the girls and any potential threat. "You're one of his, aren't you?" Ryan asked softly. "One of Walter's lines." Ranger didn't respond, of course, but his steady gaze seemed to hold a confirmation Ryan couldn't explain. When Ryan had been assigned Ranger in Afghanistan, he'd been told the dog was from the program's top bloodlines, trained since puppyhood for military work. What were the odds that his grandfather's dogs would be part of that program? What were the odds that one of them would end up assigned to his own grandson? Unless it wasn't odds at all, unless someone had made sure of it. The realization left Ryan with more questions than answers. Had Walter arranged for Ranger to be assigned to Ryan? Had he been watching, pulling strings from a distance even then? Ryan slept poorly that night, his dreams a chaotic mix of battlefields and unfamiliar scenes, of Emma smiling on a porch he now owned, of Bonds running through forests he'd never seen. In the morning he made a decision. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. The next morning Ryan called Michael Brooks. The attorney answered on the second ring, as if he'd been expecting the call. "Mr. Miller, you've been to the house, I take it?" "Yes," Ryan said. "I have questions." "I thought you might. Would you like to meet?" They arranged to meet in Oak Ridge at the only coffee shop in town, a small place called Pine and Brew with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Ryan arrived early, the girls in tow because he had nowhere to leave them. Ranger waiting patiently outside as dogs weren't allowed inside. Brooks appeared precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. He greeted the girls with surprising warmth before turning to Ryan. "Your daughters are the image of their mother," he said. "I only met Emma once, years ago, but the resemblance is striking." Ryan stiffened. "You knew Emma?" Brooks nodded, signaling to a barista for coffee. "Walter kept track of her over the years. I handled some of the paperwork." "Why, what was she to him?" "Nothing by blood," Brooks said, "but she was important to him all the same." "You found the photos, I assume?" Ryan nodded. "Emma at the house. She was just a child. Her mother, Patricia, worked for Walter for several summers. Brought Emma with her sometimes. Walter was fond of the girl. Said she reminded him of what family should be." Ryan tried to process this. "And my father? What happened between them?" Brooks sighed, accepting a mug of coffee from the barista. "That's a longer story, and not entirely mine to tell. But the short version is that your father wanted a different life than Walter had planned for him. Walter couldn't accept that. By the time he realized his mistake, James wouldn't speak to him. Pride on both sides, I suppose. And me? Why didn't he ever contact me? Fear, mostly, and later respect for your independence. He didn't want to interfere." Brooks took a sip of his coffee. "He did help, though, in ways you didn't see. The scholarship that sent Emma to college came from one of his foundations. Anonymous, of course." Ryan's head spun. Emma's education had been funded by his estranged grandfather? A man she'd met as a child but probably didn't remember? The girls had wandered to a display of local honey near the counter, examining the jars with curious fingers. Ryan watched them for a moment, struck by how quickly they'd adjusted to their new circumstances. Children were resilient in ways adults often weren't. "What about Ranger?" Ryan asked, lowering his voice. "The photos in the album. Walter was a military dog trainer." Brooks smiled slightly. "Ah, you noticed that. Yes, Walter was one of the pioneers of the modern military canine program. The dogs you see in those photos are the ancestors of many of today's service animals, including Ranger. So it wasn't a coincidence that I was assigned Ranger in Afghanistan. Walter had connections, even in his later years. When he learned you'd enlisted, he made a few calls, said if he couldn't protect you himself, he'd send the next best thing." Brooks studied Ryan's face. "Are you angry?" Ryan considered the question. Was he angry? That his grandfather had watched from afar, had influenced his life in invisible ways, had known Emma, but never reached out? "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just want to understand." "There's more," Brooks continued, reaching into his briefcase. "Walter left specific instructions about certain items in the house, things he wanted you to find in your own time, but which I'm authorized to tell you about if you ask." He pulled out a sheet of paper with a small diagram of the house. An X marked a spot in what appeared to be the kitchen floor. "There's a hidden compartment there," Brooks said, "under the old pantry. The entrance is disguised as part of the flooring. Inside, you'll find what Walter called the rest of the story." Ryan stared at the diagram. Why all the secrecy? Why not just tell me everything in the letter? Brooks closed his briefcase with a soft click. Walter was a complicated man. He believed some truths had to be earned, not given. And he believed in letting people make their own choices based on complete information. He stood, placing money on the table for the coffee. Whatever you decide to do with what you find, it's entirely your choice. Walter was very clear about that. As Brooks left, Sophie slid into his vacated seat, her eyes curious. Who was that man, really? Why was he talking about our house? Ryan folded the diagram and tucked it into his pocket. He was Grandpa Walter's friend. He was telling me about some things Grandpa Walter left for us to find. Like a treasure hunt? Lily asked, excitement coloring her voice. Ryan managed a smile. Something like that. On the drive back to the house, Ryan's mind raced with possibilities. What would he find in the hidden compartment? More photos? Letters? Some explanation for the connections between Walter and Emma's family? The girls chattered in the back seat, making plans for the treehouse they'd discovered, listing supplies they would need. Their voices anchored Ryan. Ryan, reminding him that whatever he discovered, whatever secrets the house held, his primary responsibility was to these two small lives. Everything else was secondary. At the house, Ryan sent the girls outside with Raymonger while he went to the kitchen. Following Brooks' diagram, he found the edge of a panel in the floor of the pantry, disguised by the pattern of the wooden boards. It lifted easily, revealing a shallow space beneath. Inside was a metal box, about the size of a small suitcase, with a combination lock on the front. Ryan lifted it out, surprised by its weight, and set it on the kitchen table. The lock had 3 dials, each with numbers from 0 to 99. Ryan stared at it, mind racing through possible combinations. His birthday? His father's? Walter's military ID? On a hunch, he tried Emma's birthday, 10/17/82. The lock didn't budge. Then he tried the date of their wedding, 06/04/16. Nothing. Finally, with a heaviness in his chest, he tried the date Emma died, 11/29/23. The lock clicked open. Inside the box were several items: a stack of letters bound with twine, a small wooden case, a folder of legal documents, and an envelope with Ryan's name written on it in the same handwriting as the first letter. Ryan opened this envelope first. Ryan, if you're reading this, you found what I couldn't bring myself to explain in person. Some of it may be hard to understand. Some of it may make you angry, but all of it is true. I first met Patricia Lawson in 1990 when she answered an ad for summer help at my ranch in Wyoming. She brought Emma with her sometimes, a bright, curious child who reminded me of James at that age. I didn't know then that years later, Emma would meet you, my grandson, at a coffee shop in Missoula, and that you would fall in love. When I found out, I was stunned by the coincidence. Or perhaps it wasn't coincidence at all. Perhaps some connections are meant to be, regardless of the barriers we put between them. I wanted to reach out then, to bridge the gap between us, but I was afraid. Afraid you would reject me as your father had. Afraid I would only bring pain to your new happiness. So I watched from a distance and tried to help in quiet ways. The scholarship that sent Emma to university was from my foundation. The emergency loan that helped you make rent that first year came from an account I set up. Small things, cowardly perhaps, but the only way I knew to be part of your life without disrupting it. When Emma died, I wanted to come forward, to offer this house, this legacy, directly. But Gerald and Patricia Lawson had already positioned themselves against you, and I feared my appearance would only complicate an already painful situation. So I waited, and I watched, and I prepared for the day when you might need what I left behind. In this box, you'll find the deed to the house, fully paid and in your name. You'll also find documentation of a trust I established for Sophie and Lily's education, and of an investment account in your name. It isn't a fortune. I was never interested in vast wealth, but it's enough to give you all a fresh start and security for the future. The wooden case contains my silver star and purple heart. I earned them in Korea, a lifetime ago. They should have gone to your father. Now they're yours. The letters are between Patricia and me, spanning nearly 30 years. They'll explain the connection between our families better than I can. She may not want you to read them, but I believe you have the right to know the whole truth. As for Ranger, yes, he comes from my lines. The Miller Shepherds have served in every American conflict since Korea. When I learned you had enlisted, I made arrangements through old contacts to have one assigned to you. I couldn't protect you myself, but I could send the next best thing. I hope someday you can forgive an old man's pride and fear. I hope this legacy brings you and those girls some measure of peace. Walter Ryan set the letter down, hands trembling slightly. The connections between his life and Walter's were deeper than he'd imagined, stretching back decades, influencing events he'd thought were chance or fate. He opened the wooden case next. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay two medals, the Silver Star for Valor in Combat and the Purple Heart, awarded to those wounded in action. Beside them was a black and white photo of a young Walter receiving the Silver Star, his face solemn under the weight of whatever he had done to earn it. Ryan traced the outline of the Silver Star with his finger. He had his own medals, locked away in a safety deposit box at a bank in Bozeman. He'd never displayed them, never spoken of them to the girls. What was there to say about the things a man did in war? How could he explain that sometimes courage and horror lived in the same moment? Had Walter felt the same way about his own service? Had he struggled with the memories, with the weight of decisions made in seconds that followed a man for decades? The legal documents confirmed what the letter had stated. The house was his, free and clear. A trust had been established for the girls' education, the money to be released when they turned 18, and an investment account in Ryan's name held enough to secure their immediate future. Not millions, but enough. More than enough. Ryan scanned the figures, unable to fully process what he was seeing. $3 million. Not a vast fortune by some standards, but to a man who had been sleeping in his car with his daughters just a week ago, it was beyond comprehension. The money would change everything. No more day labor, no more skipped meals, no more choosing between gas for the car and new shoes for the girls. It meant stability, security, the chance to rebuild without the constant pressure of survival. But it also meant questions. Why hadn't Walter offered this help sooner? Why watch from the shadows as Ryan struggled, as the girls suffered? Lastly, Ryan untied the twine around the letters. There were dozens, spanning from 1990 to just months before Walter's death. Letters from Patricia to Walter, and copies of his replies. He read the first one, dated June 15, 1990. Dear Mr. Miller, thank you for the opportunity to work at Pine Ridge Ranch this summer. Emma has settled in well and loves helping with the horses. She asks about you constantly, the tall man with the bon, as she calls you. I haven't told her about your connection to the Miller she'll meet someday. I'm keeping my promise. Your offer of financial support for Emma's future is generous, but Gerald would never accept it if he knew the source. He still blames you for what happened, even after all these years. The scholarship fund is a good compromise. She'll never have to know where it came from. I sometimes wonder if we're doing the right thing, keeping these secrets. But then I remember that night and I know silence is safer for everyone. Sincerely, Patricia. Ryan's brow furrowed. The connection between Patricia and Walter clearly went back further than her summer employment. What had happened that night? What secrets were they keeping? He picked up another letter, this one from 1998. Walter, Emma's starting high school next month. She's so much like her mother, sometimes it frightens me. The same independence, the same fire. Gerald tries to control it, but you can't contain that kind of spirit. Your check arrived yesterday. As always, I've put it in the account for her education. Gerald still doesn't know. He'd never forgive me if he found out I've been in contact with you all these years. I saw James's obituary in the paper last month. I'm sorry, I know you had hoped to reconcile someday. Ryan is in his junior year at Montana State, according to my sources. He looks like James, same build, same serious eyes. Emma is at Missoula. Their paths haven't crossed yet, but the world is small. I sometimes wonder if fate will bring them together despite everything we've done to separate our families. Would that be so terrible after all this time? Patricia. Ryan's heart pounded. This letter suggested Patricia had known who he was long before he ever met Emma, that she and Walter had some kind of arrangement regarding Emma's future. But why? What connected these two families so deeply? The answer came in a letter from 2003, the year Ryan had met Emma at a coffee shop near campus. Walter, it's happened. Emma called last night, giddy with excitement about a man she met in her economics class. Ryan Miller, your grandson. Of all the universities, all the classes, all the people, they found each other. I haven't told Gerald yet. He would forbid it if he knew who Ryan really was. He still believes the story we created all those years ago, that Sarah died in a car accident, that Emma is his biological daughter. The truth would destroy him, that Sarah was your son's wife first, that they had a child together. Emma, that James left them both for me, that Sarah died by her own hand afterward, leaving Emma behind. Gerald raised Emma as his own, never knowing she was James's child, your granddaughter. He can never know that the man Emma loves is her half-brother's son. I've carried this secret for 30 years. Sometimes I think it will suffocate me. What do we do now? Patricia Ryan dropped the letter as if it had burned him. His mind refused to process what he'd just read. Emma, Walter's granddaughter, his father and Emma's mother, together before Gerald? Emma and Ryan were related? No, it couldn't be. It didn't make sense. Emma had looked nothing like his father. She'd been blonde, blue-eyed, while the Millers were all dark-haired with hazel eyes. With shaking hands, Ryan picked up the next letter in the stack, dated a week later. Patricia, calm yourself. You've misunderstood what I've been trying to tell you all these years. Emma is not James's biological daughter. Sarah was pregnant when she met James, yes. They married quickly, and he claimed the child as his own. But when he left Sarah for you, the truth came out. The child wasn't his, never had been. That's why I felt responsible all these years. My son took on a child that wasn't his, then abandoned both of them. Sarah's death weighs on me still, even though James swore she had been unstable long before he left. Emma and Ryan are not related by blood. There is no reason they shouldn't be together if that's what they choose. I've kept track of Emma all these years, supported her education because I felt I owed Sarah that much. I couldn't save her, but I could make sure her daughter had opportunities. Gerald doesn't need to know any of this. Let him believe what he's always believed. Let Emma and Ryan find happiness together. They deserve that much, after all our mistakes. Walter's relief washed over Ryan so powerfully he had to grip the edge of the table. Emma wasn't related to him. There was no dark secret there, just a complicated history of marriages and mistakes and attempts at atonement. But the story explains so much. Gerald's hostility toward Ryan from the beginning, his refusal to accept him as Emma's husband. If Gerald believed Emma was truly his daughter, with no connection to the Miller family, then Ryan's appearance would have seemed like a cruel twist of fate, a reminder of the man who had taken Patricia's heart decades ago. And Walter's distant support of Emma, the scholarship, the watching from afar, it hadn't been random kindness. It had been an attempt to make amends for his son's abandonment of Emma's mother, for the chain of events that had led to her death. Ryan read further, piecing together the story from fragments of correspondence over decades. His father, James, had married Sarah briefly in the late 1970s. She had been pregnant, but the child wasn't his, a fact that came to light when James left her for Patricia, who was married to Gerald at the time. The scandal had torn apart both families. Gerald had left Patricia, only to return when Sarah took her own life, leaving behind infant Emma. In his grief and anger, Gerald had agreed to raise Emma as his own, but only if Patricia cut all ties with James and the Miller family. Walter, racked with guilt over his son's behavior and Sarah's death, had tried to make amends by secretly supporting Emma financially. Patricia had accepted this help, hiding it from Gerald, maintaining a correspondence with Walter that spanned decades. And then, by some twist of fate, Emma and Ryan had met at university, drawn to each other without knowing the tangled history that connected their families. Ryan sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by these revelations. His marriage to Emma, which had seemed like a chance meeting of souls, had been observed and silently supported by both Walter and Patricia, each carrying pieces of a shared past neither Ryan nor Emma had known about. And now, after Emma's death, the connections had come full circle. Walter's house, this house, which had once welcomed a young Emma decades ago, was now home to her daughters, continuing a bond between families that had never truly been broken. The sound of the front door opening pulled Ryan from his thoughts. He quickly gathered the letters and returned them to the metal box, leaving only the legal documents on the table. Sophie and Lily burst into the kitchen, cheeks flushed from playing outside. "Dad, we found a tree house," Sophie exclaimed. At the edge of the property. It's old, but still strong. Can we fix it up? Ryan managed a smile, pushing the weight of the past aside for the moment. Sure, we can work on it this weekend. Lily spotted the papers on the table. What are those? Ryan hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth they could understand. They're from your great-grandfather, Walter. He left us some money to help fix up the house and for your college someday. Was he rich? Sophie asked, reaching for a glass of water. Not rich, Ryan said, just prepared. Enough, Amer. He wanted to make sure we'd be okay. I wish we could have met him, Lily said, tracing the edge of the wooden case that held Walter's medals. Ryan opened the case, showing them the silver star and purple heart. In a way, you have. These were his. He earned them a long time ago, fighting for our country. Like you did, Sophie said solemnly. Like I did, Ryan agreed. And someday, these will be yours, to remember both of us. That night after dinner, Ryan sat with the girls on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. They'd spent the afternoon exploring the property, discovering the boundaries of their new world. The treehouse was indeed salvageable, a simple platform with railings and a small roof, built in the branches of an ancient oak. Ryan had promised to strengthen the supports and add a ladder on Saturday. Do we live here forever now? Lily asked, leaning against Ryan's side. If you want to, he replied. It's our home. I like it, Sophie declared. It feels like it was waiting for us. Ryan looked down at her, struck by the simple truth in her words. The house had been waiting, not just for them, but for this moment of connection, of healing, of continuation. I think you're right, he said softly. Later, after the girls were asleep, Ryan sat on the front porch with Ranger Martin at his feet. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet. The air smelled of pine and earth and possibilities. He held Walter's letter in his hands, reading it one more time by the glow of the porch light. So many secrets, so many connections he'd never known existed. A legacy both complicated and simple, a house, some money, and the truth finally told. Ranger stirred, raising his head to look at Ryan with those knowing eyes. He sent you to watch over me, Ryan said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. His last sentinel. Ranger's tail thumped once against the wooden porch. Ryan looked out at the property, at the trees silvered by moonlight, at the shadows where his daughters had played that afternoon. Tomorrow he would need to make decisions about the money, about the house, about whether to confront Patricia with what he knew. But tonight he allowed himself to simply be, to feel the weight of the past without being crushed by it, to acknowledge the pain in the loss, but also the unexpected gift of connection, of belonging to something larger than himself. Walter had been a flawed man. He had made mistakes, had let pride keep him from reconciliation, had watched from a distance rather than risk rejection. But in the end, he had tried in his own way to make amends, to build a bridge across the years of silence, to offer a legacy that was about more than money or property. Ryan folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket. Tomorrow there would be decisions to make about the house, about the money, about whether to share what he'd learned with Patricia and Gerald. Tomorrow he would begin the work of truly making this place a home for his daughters. But tonight, under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the quiet legacy of a man he'd never known, but who had shaped his life in invisible ways, Ryan allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in months. Peace, not the temporary relief of a battle survived, but the deeper quiet that comes with understanding, of the puddle, of connections that transcend time and mistakes, of belonging to something larger than himself. The house creaked softly in the night breeze, settling around them like an old friend finally at rest. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting long beams across the wooden table where Ryan sat studying a stack of papers. 6 weeks had passed since they'd moved into Walter's house. 6 weeks of cleaning, repairing, settling in. 6 weeks of learning to live with the weight of history and unexpected fortune. The girls had adapted quickly, as children often do. They'd started at the local school, made tentative friendships, established routines that didn't involve sleeping in cars or shelters. Ranger patrolled the property with renewed purpose, as if the land itself had awakened something ancestral in him. Ryan reached for his coffee, eyes fixed on the court summons that had arrived yesterday. Gerald and Patricia hadn't given up. Despite the previous ruling, they'd filed another petition for custody, citing changed circumstance and new evidence. The hearing was set for 3 weeks from now. Sarah Jenkins, his lawyer from the Veterans Legal Aid, had called that morning. "They're escalating," she'd said, her voice tight with concern. "Gerald's hired a private investigator. They know about the house." Ryan had expected this. The moment they'd moved to Oak Ridge, he'd known it was only a matter of time before Gerald discovered their new circumstances. What he hadn't anticipated was how quickly they'd use it against him. "They're claiming you deliberately concealed assets during the previous hearing," Sarah had explained, "that you were never really homeless, that you had this inheritance all along and were using the girl's situation for sympathy." It was a lie, of course. Walter's letter had arrived after the first hearing, but lies could be powerful in a courtroom, especially when backed by expensive lawyers and the veneer of respectability that money could buy. Now Ryan faced a crucial decision. The simplest path would be to reveal everything: the inheritance, the trust funds, the investment account. Show the court that he could provide stability and financial security for Sophie and Lily. It would almost certainly end Gerald's case against him. But something held him back. The money didn't feel fully his yet. It came with strings, with history, with obligations he was still trying to understand. And there was another concern, one that had been growing in him since he'd read those letters between Walter and Patricia. The money could change them, not just their circumstances, but who they were as a family. Ryan had seen what wealth did to some people. He'd watched buddies from the service come home to large insurance payouts or inheritances, only to lose themselves in excess and isolation. He didn't want that for his daughters. He didn't want them defined by what they had, but by who they were. The sound of tires on gravel pulled Ryan from his thoughts. A silver sedan was approaching, unfamiliar but expensive. Ryan tensed, one hand instinctively reaching for Ranger, who had appeared at his side. The car parked, and a young Asian-American man stepped out, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks that seemed at odds with the rural setting. He carried a leather messenger bag and approached the house with confident steps. Ryan met him on the porch, Ranger at his heels. "Mr. Miller?" the man asked, extending his hand. "I'm Matthew Chen. Michael Brooks sent me." Ryan shook his hand, wary but curious. "Brooks didn't mention you'd be coming." "It was a bit last minute," Chen admitted. "He thought you might need some assistance with the financial aspects of your inheritance. I'm a financial advisor specializing in sudden wealth management." Ryan hesitated, then stepped back. "Come in." Inside, they sat at the kitchen table, the court summons still visible among Ryan's papers. Chen noticed it but said nothing, instead opening his bag and removing a tablet and several folders. "Mr. Brooks briefed me on your situation," Chen said. $3 million in liquid assets, plus the property. It's not a massive fortune by some standards, but it's enough to change your life completely, for better or worse. "What do you mean, worse?" Ryan asked. Chen's expression grew serious. "Sudden wealth can be surprisingly destructive, Mr. Miller, especially for someone who's been through trauma. The rate at which lottery winners, professional athletes, and inheritance recipients lose everything is staggering. About 70% end up broke within 5 to 7 years." Ryan thought of the veterans he'd known who'd self-destructed after coming into money. "I'm not planning to buy a yacht." "It rarely starts with yachts," Chen said with a small smile. "It starts with seemingly reasonable decisions, helping family members, investing in a friend's business, buying a slightly larger house than you need. Before you know it, the money's gone and the life you built around it collapses." Ryan glanced toward the window where he could see Sophie and Lily playing in the yard. "So what's your advice?" "First, we protect the principal. We set up proper trusts for your daughters that can't be touched except for education. We establish a budget based on reasonable returns, not the capital itself. And most importantly, we create a purpose for the money that aligns with your values." Ryan's attention sharpened. "Purpose? Money without purpose becomes a burden," Chen said. "But money aligned with something meaningful becomes a tool for change." He paused, studying Ryan. "May I ask what you were planning to do with this inheritance?" Ryan hadn't fully articulated it, even to himself, but as Chen asked the question, the answer seemed to crystallize. "This house," Ryan said slowly, "it's too big for just us. I've been thinking about the other guys I served with. So many of them came home to nothing. No support, no community, just nightmares and empty apartments. He looked around the kitchen, seeing it with new eyes. This could be something more than just our home. Chen nodded, a spark of interest in his eyes. A veterans retreat? Maybe something like that. A place where people could catch their breath. Not just veterans, anyone who needs time to heal. Chen opened one of his folders, revealing printouts of various organizational structures. There are several ways to approach this. A nonprofit foundation, a community trust, each has different tax implications and operational considerations. For the next 3 hours, they delved into the complexities of wealth management. Chen explained tax brackets, estate planning, charitable foundations, and investment strategies with patient clarity. Ryan took careful notes, occasionally asking questions that revealed both his intelligence and his inexperience with financial matters. The biggest challenge for someone in your position, Chen explained, is balancing immediate needs with long-term security. The tax implications alone can be daunting. For instance, if you establish a charitable foundation but don't structure it correctly, you could end up with significant personal tax liability. Ryan frowned. I hadn't considered that. Most people don't, Chen said. That's why sudden wealth can be so treacherous. The rules are complex and mistakes can be costly. He pulled out another document. Let me show you what a sustainable financial model might look like. Together, they constructed a preliminary plan. A portion of the inheritance would be placed in protected trusts for the girl's education and future needs. Another portion would fund immediate home improvements and living expenses. The largest share would establish a nonprofit foundation to operate what Ryan was already thinking of as the Miller House for Healing. You'll need professional management, Chen advised, a board of directors with experience in nonprofit operations, legal counsel to navigate zoning and liability issues, an accountant specializing in charitable organizations. Ryan nodded, feeling simultaneously overwhelmed and exhilarated. The vision was taking shape, not just as a vague idea, but as a concrete possibility with blueprints and budgets and timelines. What about the court case? He asked finally, indicating the summons. Should I use the inheritance as leverage? Chen studied him thoughtfully. That's not a financial question, Mr. Miller. That's a values question. What message do you want to send with this inheritance? What example do you want to set for your daughters? The question lingered in Ryan's mind long after Chen had left, promising to return with formal proposals the following week. What message did he want to send? What example did he want to set? As evening fell, Ryan called Sarah Jenkins. I've made a decision about the case, he told her. I'm not going to use the inheritance as leverage. There was a pause on the other end. Ryan, this could make the difference. The judge would see you can provide stability. I know, Ryan said, but I want to win this the right way. Because I'm their father and I love them. Not because I suddenly have money. I want the court to see who we are, not what we have. Sarah sighed. It's your call, but Gerald Lawson won't hold back. He'll use everything he has against you. Let him, Ryan said, a quiet determination in his voice. Some things matter more than winning. After hanging up, Ryan sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sophie and Lily were inside, working on homework at the dining room table. Ranger lay at his feet, vigilant as always. Ryan thought about Walter, about the choices he'd made, how pride and fear had kept him from reaching out, how he'd tried to help from a distance but never risked real connection. Ryan didn't want to repeat those mistakes. He wanted to use this legacy to build bridges, not walls. The next morning, Ryan drove into town and visited the local hardware store. Earl Simmons, the owner, greeted him with a nod. Needed something for the house? Earl asked. Actually, Ryan said, I was wondering if you knew any local contractors. I'm thinking about adding an extension, maybe converting the old barn into living quarters. Earl's eyebrows rose. Planning on a bigger family? Ryan hesitated, then decided on honesty. Not exactly. I was thinking about opening the place up. For veterans, maybe. People who need somewhere to stay while they get back on their feet. Earl studied him for a long moment. Your grandfather would have liked that idea, he said finally. He was always helping folks. Quiet-like. Never wanted recognition for it. You knew him well? Well enough. Earl pulled out a business card from under the counter. My son's a contractor. Best in the county. Tell him I sent you. Over the next month, Ryan immersed himself in creating a blueprint for the Miller House for Healing. With Chen's guidance, he established the legal foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a clear mission statement and governance structure. The paperwork alone was overwhelming. Tax forms, applications for nonprofit status, insurance policies, liability waivers. I never knew changing the world required so many signatures, Ryan joked to Chen during one of their marathon sessions at the kitchen table. Changing the world is the easy part, Chen replied. Doing it legally, that's where it gets complicated. The practical challenges were equally daunting. The old barn needed extensive renovation to meet building codes for residential use. The property's septic system required upgrading to handle additional residents. The driveway needed widening to accommodate emergency vehicles. Each obstacle required time, money, and expertise. Ryan found himself learning a new vocabulary: easements, variances, environmental impact assessments. He attended township meetings, presented plans to local officials, negotiated with neighbors whose permission was needed for certain modifications. Through it all, the girls watched and absorbed. They saw their father poring over blueprints late into the night, making phone calls, meeting with contractors and officials. They listened as he explained his vision to skeptical bureaucrats and curious neighbors. They witnessed the slow transformation of an idea into reality. "Why does it take so long?" Sophie asked one evening, peering at the calendar where Ryan had mapped out the project timeline. "Because we're building something that will last," Ryan explained, "and lasting things take time to get right." As the physical transformation of the property began, Ryan kept his promise to Sarah. He didn't mention the inheritance or his plans for the Miller House in any of the court filings. When Gerald's lawyers requested financial disclosures, he provided them honestly but without elaboration. Yes, he had inherited a house and some money. No, he hadn't known about it during the previous hearing. The court date approached with the inexorability of a gathering storm. Ryan prepared as best he could, reviewing his testimony with Sarah, gathering documentation of the girls' enrollment in school, their medical checkups, their adjustment to life in Oak Ridge. 2 days before the hearing, the first major construction milestone was reached. The barn's exterior renovation was complete. The old weathered wood had been reinforced, windows replaced, a new roof installed. It looks sturdy now, welcoming, its weathered character preserved, but its structure sound. Ryan stood with the girls at dusk, admiring the transformation. "What do you think?" he asked them. "It looks happy," Lily said, tilting her head thoughtfully, like it's smiling. Sophie nodded in agreement. "Can we help decide what goes inside?" "Absolutely," Ryan said. "This is your home too, your project too." That night, they sat at the dining room table with colored pencils and paper, drawing what they imagined for the interior spaces. Sophie designed a common room with bookshelves and comfortable chairs so people can read stories to their kids. Lily sketched a garden with labeled plants for growing food and flowers for everyone. Their visions were simple but profound: spaces for connection, for nourishment, for beauty. Ryan added their drawings to the growing collection of plans and documents that represented the Miller House for Healing. The day of the court hearing dawned clear and cold. Ryan dressed carefully in his best clothes, made breakfast for the girls, and drove them to school with promises to pick them up early for ice cream, regardless of how the hearing went. "Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad at us?" Lily asked as they pulled up to the school. Ryan chose his words carefully. "They're not mad at you. They miss your mom, and sometimes that makes people do things they might not otherwise do." "Like try to take us away?" Sophie asked, her eyes serious. "Yes," Ryan admitted, "but that's not going to happen. You're staying with me, no matter what." At the courthouse, Sarah was waiting on the steps, her expression determined. "Ready?" Ryan nodded. "As I'll ever be." Inside, Gerald and Patricia were already seated at the plaintiff's table. Gerald looked confident, almost smug, while Patricia seemed withdrawn, her gaze fixed on her hands. Their lawyer, Victor Hargrove, was arranging papers with the precision of a man who knew his case was strong. The hearing began with Hargrove presenting their case, a carefully constructed narrative of Ryan's deception regarding his financial situation, his unstable lifestyle choices, and the questionable environment he was creating for the girls. Your Honor, Hargrove concluded, Mr. Miller has demonstrated a pattern of withholding crucial information and making impulsive decisions without considering the well-being of his daughters. The recent inheritance provides him with resources, but not the judgment needed to use them wisely. We ask the court to place these children with their grandparents, who can provide both material comfort and moral stability. When Sarah rose to present their response, her approach was direct and honest. Your Honor, the inheritance my client received came after the previous hearing. There was no deception, only timing. As for how Mr. Miller is using these resources, he's creating a stable home for his daughters while also establishing a nonprofit foundation to help other families in need. Far from being impulsive, he has engaged financial and legal advisors, followed proper procedures for permits and zoning, and involved his daughters in age-appropriate ways. The judge listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When Sarah finished, she turned to Ryan. Mr. Miller, I'd like to hear from you directly. What is this project you're undertaking, and how does it impact your daughters? Ryan stood, hands steady despite his racing heart. Your Honor, I'm converting part of the property into transitional housing for veterans and families in crisis. The main house remains our family home, separate and private. The girls are involved in ways that teach them compassion and community service, but their education, activities, and home life always come first. And why didn't you highlight this inheritance in your response to the petition? The judge asked. Because I don't believe having money makes me a better father, Ryan said simply. I was a good father when we were homeless. I'm the same father now. The circumstances have changed, but my love and commitment to my daughters haven't. The judge nodded, making another note. Mr. Hargrove, your response? Hargrove stood smoothly. Your Honor, while Mr. Miller's charitable intentions may seem admirable, they further demonstrate his questionable judgment. Transforming a family residence into a facility housing strangers, potentially individuals with serious psychological issues, creates an inherently unstable environment for young children. Additionally, the time and resources devoted to this project necessarily detract from the attention these girls deserve after losing their mother. Ryan felt his face flush with anger, but before he could respond, an unexpected voice cut through the courtroom. That's not true. Patricia Lawson had stood up, her voice quiet but clear. Gerald turned to her, shock evident on his face. Patricia, sit down, he hissed. She ignored him. Your Honor, I'd like to speak. The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. Mrs. Lawson, you wish to address the court? I do. Patricia stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. What my husband and our lawyer are telling you isn't accurate. I've seen what Ryan is building at Walter Miller's house. It's not dangerous or unstable. It's healing. Gerald stood now too, his face flushed with anger. Patricia, stop this immediately. The judge held up her hand. Mr. Lawson, you will be seated. Mrs. Lawson, please continue. Patricia took a deep breath. Your Honor, there's something I just needed to explain about Walter Miller and about my family's connection to him. For the next several minutes, Patricia spoke with growing confidence, revealing pieces of the complex history between the families. She didn't share everything, not the full story Ryan had discovered in the letters, but enough to make clear that there were deep connections, old wounds, and patterns she didn't want to see repeated. When Emma died, she continued, her voice breaking slightly, I was afraid. Afraid for Sophie and Lily, yes, but also afraid of losing the last connection to my daughter. I let that fear guide me, and I was wrong. She turned to face Ryan directly. I've watched what you're doing with Walter's house. You're not just building apartments or a shelter. You're creating the kind of community Emma always believed in. One where people help each other heal, where children learn compassion by seeing it in action. That's the legacy she would have wanted for her daughters. The courtroom was silent as Patricia turned back to the judge. I'm withdrawing my support for this petition, Your Honor. The girls belong with their father. I hope we can work out a visitation arrangement that allows us to be part of their lives, but I no longer believe they should be separated from Ryan. Gerald's face had turned from red to ashen. Patricia, you can't. Yes, I can, she interrupted, her voice stronger now. Emma would be ashamed of what we've done. I'm not going to continue it. The judge looked at Gerald. Mr. Lawson, do you wish to continue with this petition without your wife's support? Gerald looked from Patricia to Ryan, then to the judge. The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly, leaving behind a tired old man clutching at shadows. No, Your Honor, he said finally. I, I withdraw the petition. The judge nodded. Then this matter is resolved. Mr. Miller retains full custody of his daughters. I recommend the parties work with family services to establish an appropriate visitation schedule. She struck her gavel once. This hearing is adjourned. In the corridor outside the courtroom, Ryan approached Patricia, who stood alone while Gerald spoke with Hargrove at the far end of the hallway. Thank you, Ryan said simply. Patricia nodded, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. Walter would be proud of what you're doing. He always wanted to heal the rift between our families. He just didn't know how. One of the girls would love to see you, that Ryan offered. When you're ready. I'd like that, she said. I think Gerald will need more time, but eventually maybe he'll understand too. As they parted ways, Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. One battle was over. Now he could focus entirely on building the future that Walter's legacy had made possible. The months that followed were transformative. With the legal cloud of the custody battle dispersed, Ryan threw himself into creating the Miller House for Healing. The barn renovation proceeded rapidly, its interior divided into 4 comfortable apartments, each with private bedrooms and bathrooms, but shared kitchen and living spaces. The financial challenges were substantial. Despite Chen's careful planning, costs escalated as hidden issues emerged: rotting support beams that needed replacing, electrical systems that required complete rewiring, drainage problems that necessitated extensive excavation. This is how it always goes with old buildings, Earl's son, the contractor, explained with the resignation of experience. They hide their problems until you're committed. Ryan understood the metaphor all too well. Wasn't that true of people too? The deepest wounds often remain concealed until healing had already begun, until it was too late to turn back. Despite the setbacks, progress continued. By late autumn, the first apartment was complete. Freshly painted walls, simple but comfortable furniture, windows that overlooked the mountains to the west. Ryan stood in the center of the space, trying to see it through the eyes of someone who might arrive there broken, exhausted, in need of sanctuary. Would they feel the peace he'd tried to build into these walls? Would they sense the attention behind each careful choice? The soft colors, the sturdy furniture, the absence of institutional sterility? It feels like hope, Sophie declared when he showed the girls the finished apartment. She ran her hand along the kitchen counter, inspected the bookshelves, tested the chairs for bounciness. But it needs pictures, Lily added thoughtfully. Blank walls feel lonely. That observation sparked a new project. All right. Ryan found an old digital camera at a thrift store and gave it to Lily, who had been continuing her photography experiments with the Polaroid. Maybe you could make some pictures for the walls, he suggested. Lily took to the task with unexpected passion. She began documenting life around the property. Morning frost on the garden, sunlight through the pine trees, Ranger alertly watching a squirrel, Sophie reading on the porch swing. Her eye was natural, finding beauty in ordinary moments, capturing light and shadow with intuitive skill. These are really good, Ryan told her one evening as they reviewed the day's images on the computer. You have a gift for seeing things other people might miss. Lily beamed at the praise, her usual reserve melting momentarily. Can we print them? For the walls? Ryan nodded. We can do better than that. We can frame them properly, make them look professional. As winter approached, the physical transformation of the property continued. The caretaker's cottage was renovated next, its single bedroom and compact kitchen designed for a resident manager who could oversee daily operations once the Miller house began accepting residents. The question of who that manager might be remained open until a cold November afternoon when a battered pickup truck turned into the driveway. The man who emerged moved with the careful deliberation of someone managing chronic pain. Tall, weathered, with close-cropped hair, and the hyper-vigilant gaze of a combat veteran. Can I help you? Ryan asked, stepping onto the porch. The man approached, stopping at the foot of the steps. Name's Jason Carter, 10th Mountain Division. Heard about what you're building here. Ryan studied him, noting the military bearing that never quite disappeared, the way he positioned himself with sight lines to all approaches. the slight favoring of his left leg. Word travels fast, Ryan said. We're not even open yet. Carter nodded. Veterans grapevine. Faster than the internet sometimes. He glanced around the property, taking in the construction, the renovated barn, the main house. Could use some help? I've got carpentry experience, electrical too. There was something in the man's eyes. Not desperation exactly, but a contained urgency, as if this conversation mattered more than he was willing to show. We could, Ryan agreed. The caretaker's cottage needs finishing. You have somewhere to stay, meanwhile? Carter hesitated, then gestured toward his truck. Got a camper shell. I'm good. Ryan recognized the pride in the response, the unwillingness to acknowledge need. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. The cottage has heat and water, he said. Floor needs finishing and the kitchen's not complete, but there's a bed. You're welcome to it while you work on the rest. Relief flickered across Carter's face, quickly masked. Appreciated. Fair wage for fair work. That's the deal, Ryan agreed, extending his hand. Ryan Miller. Miller, Carter repeated, shaking Ryan's hand firmly. Any relation to Walter Miller, the canine trainer? Ryan's surprise must have shown on his face because Carter continued, served with one of his dogs in Afghanistan. Best animal I ever knew. Saved our unit more times than I can count. It was another thread connecting past to present, another invisible line in the web of relationships that seemed to center on this property, on Walter's legacy. He was my grandfather, Ryan said. This was his house. Carter nodded as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. Thought so. There's a look about this place. Solid, like it was built to last through whatever comes. In that moment, Ryan knew he'd found not just a carpenter, but the right person to help steward the Miller house through its next phase. Carter moved into the cottage that evening, his few possessions transferred from the truck with military efficiency. The girls were initially shy around him, his taciturn manner and imposing presence intimidating until they discovered his weakness, an absolute inability to resist Ranger's requests for belly rubs. You speak dog, Lily observed, watching as Carter knelt to greet Ranger with exactly the right sequence of gestures to earn the shepherd's immediate trust. Had a lot of practice, Carter replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in what might have been a smile. Dogs make more sense than people, most of the time. Over the following weeks, Carter proved invaluable. His carpentry skills were exceptional, his work ethic relentless, his understanding of what veterans might need in a transitional space intuitive. He installed additional soundproofing in the bedrooms for the nightmares, reinforced bathroom doors because sometimes you need to feel secure, added outdoor seating areas for when the walls close in. He rarely spoke about his own service or what had brought him to the Miller house. Ryan didn't press. He recognized the slow process of building trust, of revealing oneself through actions rather than words. By December, the first phase of construction was complete. 4 apartments in the renovated barn, the caretaker's cottage where Carter now officially resided as property manager, and a common building converted from the old garage with a shared kitchen, dining area, and meeting rooms. The Miller House for Healing was ready for its first residents. Ryan had established connections with veterans organizations, domestic violence shelters, and social service agencies across the state. The application process was straightforward. People in need of transitional housing could stay for up to 6 months, participating in community life and working toward their next steps. The first family arrived just before Christmas. Michael, a young Marine veteran with a traumatic brain injury, his wife Anna, and their 2-year-old son Ethan. They moved into the largest apartment, their few possessions barely filling the space. Anna was 7 months pregnant, her second child due in February. They had been living with relatives in increasingly tense circumstances. Michael's unpredictable symptoms straining even the most loving relationships. We just need some breathing room, Anna explained as Ryan helped them settle in. A place where we don't have to apologize for needing help. No apologies needed here, Ryan assured her. That's what this place is for. Sophie and Lily immediately adopted Ethan as an honorary younger brother, showing him the property with the solemnity of official tour guides. This is the garden where we'll plant vegetables in spring, Sophie explained, pointing to the dormant plots covered in winter mulch. And that's the tree house, but it's too icy to climb now. Ethan followed them with wide-eyed fascination. This new world of space and freedom, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment they'd left behind. That evening, the first communal dinner was held in the common building. Ryan had kept it simple, a hearty stew, fresh bread from the local bakery, a salad made with the last storage vegetables from Earl's garden. Carter joined them, still quiet but visibly more at ease with each passing week. The girls chattered happily, drawing Ethan and his parents into conversation, filling the space with the simple joy of shared food and company. As Ryan watched them, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was what Walter's house had been waiting for, not just his small family, but this expanding circle of connection, this community built on mutual support and understanding. Others arrived in the weeks that followed. A single mother fleeing domestic violence with her teenage son, an older veteran struggling with isolation and alcoholism after his wife's death, a family of four who had lost everything in a house fire. Each brought their own story, their own pain, their own gifts to the growing community. The Miller house operated on simple principles: respect for privacy, contribution to shared spaces, commitment to moving forward. There were no mandatory programs, no rigid schedules. People could seek therapy if they chose, could participate in group activities or keep to themselves, could work or rest as their situation required. The only real requirement was kindness, to oneself and to others. It was amazing, Ryan observed, how healing that simple standard could be when consistently applied. Patricia began visiting regularly, initially just for brief afternoons with the girls, but gradually staying longer, finding her own place in the community. She helped in the common kitchen, taught a knitting class that became unexpectedly popular among both women and men, read stories to the children who now played together on the property. Emma would have loved this, she told Ryan one evening, as they watched Lily orchestrating a group photo of all the residents on the front porch of the main house. This is exactly the kind of place she always talked about creating. Ryan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I think about that a lot, how she's still here in a way through what we're building. Gerald remained distant, his pride still wounded, but Ryan kept the door open, sending photos of the girls, invitations to special occasions, updates on their school achievements. Eventually, Ryan hoped the old man's heart would soften. Time had a way of putting grievances into perspective. As winter deepened, the Miller house established its rhythms: communal dinners 3 times a week, a transportation schedule for school and appointments, quiet hours after 9, movie nights on Fridays. The residents shifted between independence and community, finding the balance that worked for their specific needs. Lily's photography evolved from a hobby into something more significant. She documented daily life at the Miller house with remarkable sensitivity. Michael teaching his son to build with blocks. The teenage boy who had arrived angry and withdrawn, now playing basketball with Carter. The elderly veteran carefully tending indoor seedlings for the spring garden. We should do something with these, Ryan suggested one evening as they reviewed her growing collection. They tell the story of this place better than words could. Lily considered this seriously. Like a show? With my pictures on the walls? Exactly like that, Ryan agreed. We could invite people from town, show them what we're building here. The idea took root and blossomed. Ryan found an affordable printer in town, willing to produce enlargements of Lily's best photographs. Carter built simple frames from reclaimed wood. The residents helped mount and arrange the images in the common building. The exhibition opened on a snowy February evening. Ryan had kept it small, inviting only the local community, Earl from the hardware store, the contractors who had worked on the renovations, neighbors who had been curious but cautious about the project. About 30 people arrived, stomping snow from their boots, exclaiming over the transformation of the property they had watched from a distance. Lily, normally shy, found her confidence as she guided visitors through her photographs. This one shows how people can be sad and happy at the same time, she explained, pointing to an image of Anna holding her newborn daughter, tears streaming down her face but a smile lighting her eyes. And this one is about how helping someone else can help you too. The photograph showed the teenage boy teaching an elderly resident how to use a smartphone, both of their faces intent with concentration. The visitors moved through the exhibition with growing appreciation, not just for the photographs themselves, but for the story they told collectively. A story of broken people finding wholeness together, of isolation transformed into community, of pain acknowledged but not permitted to define the future. As the evening concluded, Earl approached Ryan, his weathered face thoughtful. "Walter would be proud," he said simply. "This is exactly what this old place needed, new life." Ryan nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "That's what we all needed, I think." The success of the exhibition expanded awareness of the Miller House beyond Oak Ridge. A reporter from the county newspaper wrote a feature article. Social service agencies from neighboring counties began referring clients. The waiting list for residency grew. With Chen's guidance, Ryan applied for grants to expand the program, to build additional housing units, to add specialized services like job training and childcare. The initial inheritance would sustain them for several years, but long-term sustainability required broader support. Through it all, Ryan maintained the boundary between the Miller House as a community project and his family's private life. The main house remained their sanctuary, a place where Sophie and Lily could retreat from the intensity of sharing their home with people in crisis, where Ryan could process the challenges of balancing his roles as father, foundation director, and wounded healer, still addressing his own trauma. It wasn't always easy. There were conflicts among residents, setbacks in recovery, financial pressures, exhausting days when Ryan questioned whether he'd taken on too much. But there were also moments of such profound connection and healing that all doubts were temporarily banished. Michael holding his newborn daughter with steady hands, the elderly veteran laughing for the first time since arriving, the teenage boy announcing he was returning to school after months of refusal. Spring arrived with explosive green energy, the long Montana winter finally releasing its grip. The gardens were planted, the children's playground installed, the outdoor spaces reclaimed from snow and mud. New residents arrived as others moved on, their time at the Miller House complete, their next chapters beginning. One mild evening in late April, Ryan sat on the porch of the main house, watching as residents and their children played an impromptu game of soccer on the front lawn. Ranger lay beside him, gray muzzle resting on paws, eyes tracking the movement with alert interest despite his advancing age. Carter appeared from the direction of the caretaker's cottage, moving with the slightly easier gait that came from months of regular meals, reduced stress, and meaningful work. "Got a call from Denver VA," he said, settling into the chair beside Ryan. "They've got a family needing placement. Iraq vet with 3 kids. Wife died last year. They're living in their car." Ryan nodded, the echo of his own recent past reverberating in the story. "When can they come?" "Tomorrow, if we can make space. Johnson family is moving out next week, but that's not soon enough." Ryan considered their options, mentally reviewing the property's resources. "The studio apartment in the main house is ready. It's small for 4 people, but it's better than a car. We can move them to larger quarters when the Johnsons leave." Carter nodded, satisfied. "I'll call it in." He hesitated, then added, "It's working, you know. What you've built here, it matters." Coming from Carter, a man of few words and fewer compliments, the statement carried significant weight. Ryan acknowledged it with a nod, knowing that further comment would only embarrass them both. As Carter returned to his cottage to make the call, Sophie and Lily emerged from the house, having finished their homework. They joined Ryan on the porch, Sophie with a book, Lily with her ever-present camera. "Dad," Lily said after a moment of companionable silence, "I've been thinking. We need a sign." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "A sign?" "For the front gate," she explained, "so people know they've found the right place. A big sign that says the Miller House for Healing, so when they're scared or tired and not sure if they should come in, they know it's okay." The simple insight struck Ryan with unexpected force. Of course they needed a sign, not just for practical directions, but as a symbol, a declaration of purpose, an invitation to those who had forgotten that safe places could exist. "That's a really good idea," he told her. "Maybe you could help design it." Lily's face brightened. "I already did." She ran inside and returned with a sketch pad, flipping it open to reveal a carefully drawn design, a simple house outline with an open door, surrounded by trees, with the words, "The Miller House for Healing," in clear letters beneath. "It's perfect," Ryan said, meaning it completely. "We'll have it made exactly like this." The following afternoon, Ryan waited at the front gate. The Denver VA had called to confirm the new family was on their way. David Reyes and his 3 children, ages 4 to 10, traveling in a 2005 Subaru Outback that contained all their remaining possessions. They had been homeless for 3 months, ever since being evicted from their apartment, when David's PTSD had made it impossible for him to maintain employment. When the dusty Subaru finally appeared on the rural road, Ryan felt a wave of déjà vu so powerful it momentarily disoriented him. How many times had he parked his own vehicle in secluded spots? The girls sleeping in the back, Ranger standing guard, the future a blank wall of uncertainty? The car pulled up to the gate and stopped. The driver, David presumably, sat motionless behind the wheel, staring at the property beyond, his expression unreadable through the dirty windshield. In the back seat, small faces peered out with the wary curiosity of children who had learned to be cautious about new situations. Ryan approached slowly, giving the man time to assess him, to make his own decision about whether to open the door or drive away. After nearly a minute, the driver's window descended halfway. "Mr. Reyes?" Ryan asked. The man nodded once, his eyes scanning Ryan's face, his posture, his hands, conducting the threat assessment that became second nature in combat zones. "I'm Ryan Miller," Ryan said. "We've got a place ready for you and your kids. It's not fancy, but it's safe, and it's yours for as long as you need it." David's gaze flickered to the house beyond the gate, to the renovated barn, to the children playing in the distance. "Whitquay?" he asked finally, the single word containing volumes of suspicion and desperate hope. Ryan understood the question beneath the question. Why would a stranger offer help? What was the catch, the obligation, the hidden cost? "Because someone did the same for me and my daughters," Ryan answered simply, "and because no one should have to fight alone after they come home." Something shifted in David's expression. Not quite trust, but its hesitant precursor. The possibility that this might be real, that help might exist without hidden agenda. "We don't have much," David said, his voice rough with pride and shame. "You have everything that matters," Ryan replied, glancing at the children in the back seat. "The rest we can figure it out together." David nodded again. Decision made. He put the car in gear and followed Ryan through the gate, up the winding drive to where a new chapter waited to begin. That evening, as the Reyes family settled into their temporary quarters, Ryan walked to the edge of the property where a small hill offered views across the valley. The setting sun painted the mountains gold and purple, the lengthening shadows softening the contours of the land. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, from the depths of loss and homelessness to this moment of abundance and purpose. It hadn't been a straight line. It hadn't been easy. But standing here now, watching the Miller house come alive with new energy, new stories, new possibilities for healing, he knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Sophie and Lily joined him on the hillside, one on either side, their small hands finding his with the easy confidence of children who knew they were loved. Ranger followed, ever the guardian, settling at their feet with a contented sigh. "Are you happy, Dad?" Sophie asked, looking up at him with Emma's eyes. Ryan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Happiness seemed too simple a word for what he felt. This complex mixture of gratitude and purpose, of grief transformed but not forgotten, of connections restored and expanded in ways he never could have imagined. "Yes," he said finally. "I am. Are you?" Both girls nodded, their faces solemn with the weight of their own journeys, yet lightened by the safety they'd found, the community they'd helped create. As they stood together watching the day's light fade from the valley, Ryan thought about Walter, the grandfather he'd never known, but whose legacy had made all of this possible. Not just the house or the money, but the example of someone who had tried, however imperfectly, to make amends, to build bridges, to leave behind something better than he'd found. In the distance, the lights of the Miller house began to glow against the gathering dusk, warm squares of illumination marking each space where healing was taking place, where broken lives were being rebuilt, where hope was being rekindled one careful day at a time. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a beacon, a sanctuary, a declaration that pain might be inevitable, but suffering didn't have to be endured alone. And as Ryan stood with his daughters on the hillside, surrounded by the legacy they were building together, he knew that this moment, This purpose, this community of healing, was the true inheritance Walter had left behind. Not wealth or property, but the chance to transform brokenness into belonging, to create from the fragments of the past something new and whole and undeniably good. The first stars appeared overhead, bright points of light in the deepening blue. Below, more lights came on in the buildings as evening routines began. Dinner preparations, children's baths, quiet conversations in shared spaces. Time to head back, Ryan said softly. There's work to do. Together they turned toward home, walking the path they had created through a wilderness of loss, guided by the lights that shone welcome in the gathering dark.